Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo alongside me. Thank you guys so much for subscribing, listening on Apple, Spotify, anywhere else you can listen to your podcasts. Over 5,000 listens, so a nice accomplishment for us. Once again, we're getting a couple hundred plays per episode. It's great, and obviously doing so well here on YouTube. So please like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on the very, very slow start to the summer. Matt, June 26th already. Nothing of significance popping up, anything over the line. We obviously know there's Euro, Copa America going on. But we're going to get into probably the biggest rumor currently. This is more or less a Di Marzio rumor about Milan contacting Chelsea regarding Romelu Lukaku. So, yeah, we're just going to get right into it. They contacted Chelsea about him. We've kind of heard the whispers in the past about this Todd Bowley relationship with Jerry Cardinal and how this could be a mix and match of something that could end up fitting for Milan, especially if this Xerxes deal can't get over the hump. So I kind of wanted to talk about it, get your thoughts on it, get everyone's thoughts in the comments on it, on the possibility of one of Milan's biggest villains of the past decade or so potentially joining the club. So yeah, let's just talk about the prospect of the possibility of this happening. You would have to imagine this is sort of a last resort in a way, not a last resort, but sort of, your options after not getting Xerxes, Sesko. Guirassy has been confirmed to go to Dortmund today. So those options are waning. Jimenez was really the other one, but Romelu Lukaku in red and black, really?
I mean, it's interesting because I think that when you look at the entire picture of Romelu Lukaku and the prospect of him becoming a Milan player, a lot makes sense if you think about it. Player that has experience in Serie A. He is currently at a club, Chelsea, who we have a really good working relationship with. We did 2 deals with them last year for Christian Pulisic and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. We've done Fikayo Tomori and Olivier Giroud in the past, just to name a few. And this is classic Milan, as I mentioned in previous episodes, where they thrive in a way on these sort of moves where it's their players at other clubs that are deemed surplus to requirements. Milan are like, cool, that's an opportunity for us. We could get him on the low. You want to get rid of him. You know he doesn't want to be there. You don't want him. Let's jump in and see if we can get him for our price, right?
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, I think it's a real possibility. I think that, look, Chelsea want to move him on a permanent basis. They don't want to do this yearly loan situation they've been doing. He was at Inter, Lukaku, then he had the big move to Chelsea. Didn't work out. He was loaned back to Inter. Then he came back and he was loaned out to Roma. Now he's going back to Chelsea. I just think that Chelsea want to rid themselves of this, regardless of what money they get back. And not to mention, they have their own concerns and issues with regards to financial fair play and adjusting their wage bill and getting players that are really just have no use at the club. So with all that being said, with Milan needing a striker, I don't think it's a far-fetched opportunity for them. I do think that their main track right now is still Joshua Xerxes, despite reports that Manchester United have overthrown them for the deal and they're maybe willing to ante up for the commissions, which seems to be what's holding up this deal. So in that sense, that's a possibility. As far as my feelings towards the move and the player and the fit, I'm a little bit skeptical. I mean, this was something I tweeted about a couple weeks ago, and I got some good feedback from people saying, he could probably do really well in this system. He's physical. He has really good runners behind him that he can play off of and play for. So there's a lot of things that I think people could maybe get excited about, but I can see the skepticism. A player that, in recent years seems to be not as well-oiled as far as the running and the conditioning and the fitness level that he was during that COVID year, especially at Inter under Conte. So that's where I have my restraints. As far as what I think he could produce, I think he could still be someone that gives you 12 to 13, 14 goals. I mean, I think he got 12 this year in the league, and He
That
wasn't.
side did not create it all.
They didn't create a lot. Dybala was the main guy who was also injured quite a bit as
took the
well.
penalty kicks as well.
They had the coaching change mid-season with Mourinho to Daniele De Rossi. So it's hard to kind of go based off that. I just think that this has to be a move that is more so on the back burner. Now, maybe, Martino, maybe I want to throw it over to you and ask you this question. Is there a possibility that maybe they're throwing the idea of Lukaku around as that second striker that they were looking to bring in? Because the focus was on Xerxes, and then all the reports were saying Broha and this guy and that guy as an additional player, not a replacement of Xerxes, as or an alternative. So do you think that that is something that they're maybe exploring? Maybe they get him on a nominal fee. Chelsea gets rid of his wages. Milan get him on somewhat of a prove-it deal where it's like, hey, it's 2 to 3 years, but the wages aren't like outrageous. And Milan have him as their second option, who is the more physical player, the out-and-out striker that maybe Xerxes can play off of. It gives Milan a different look in game. What do you think of that?
I don't think it's realistic, unfortunately, fiscally. There's no way that they have the holes in this team. They're already sort of like kind of refusing to pay up with Xerxes and this agent commission, which is fair. Again, I don't know how many times I have to say it. 15 million is too much. For Lukaku, you're kind of looking at least 5 million net. So if they get the Xerxes deal over the line, you're talking about
that.
You're talking about, if in the hypothetical that you're discussing, you're saying 9 million net between two strikers. When you have to fill out a CDM, a right back, a center back. And I know if you go through the numbers, Giroud is getting some money. We had some other players that are off the books. Caldara, which funnily enough was one of the higher paid defenders. You have that. To me, I don't want to say yes because this management has done the opposite. They do everything the opposite of going for it. Now, would that be a sort of a statement signing where you can compete in two competitions, where Fonseca could have Xerxes and Lukaku play off of each other? But where does that put Leao? Where does that put Pulisic? Where do these attacking players go with them? It's kind of a hard fit. Lukaku is a better passer than some people give him credit for. I think he does a great job of finding players in behind, like you were mentioning, he's capable of. But just the overall amount of what this deal would cost is they have around a 35 million euro fixed fee, right? That was supposed to be the amount that he would cost. But how much is Lukaku taking a cut from what he was getting? He was getting insane money. Does Lukaku finally understand, I need to find a home for a couple of years? Because if I go wherever I want, like Napoli, for example, right, is the other name linked to him and them because of Antonio Conte, because of the reported whispers of Osimhen leaving. Is it a guarantee Osimhen's clause gets triggered? This is a guy with an injury history. Whether it's severe injuries or muscular issues, and you're talking about a Premier League side spending over 120 million. By the way, the last striker to go for that was Lukaku, who has had injury issues. Again, we're talking about a guy who isn't on the same level as he was physically with Conte and Inter. Not going to happen again. Sorry. The older you get, he's 31 now. Can he survive in Serie A? Absolutely. He had 21 goals across all competitions with Roma this year. He was a good player, but when Milan are in their situation, I would think they need great. And unfortunately, I think he would cost too much. Now, I think I would be over the moon if Milan could actually pull something off where they end up paying for Lukaku next season in terms of a transfer fee, where it's okay, we'll pay you 6 to 7 million this year for the loan, and we'll give you 20 something million next year. As an obligation. It would have to be an obligation deal. Chelsea is not doing this option thing again. How many times, like you mentioned it, you make a great point. They really want to do this carousel with him? I doubt it. For me, it's just too much because, again, you look at it, Chelsea, Inter, Roma, had injury issues at two of the clubs. He's had a pretty unlucky tournament, I would say, at Euro 2024. As much as you're able to meme him and mock this guy, he's still in position to score, and he's marginally offside. It's not fully on him. He's putting himself into position. Sometimes you need to get into the right environment. Roma was not a great environment for him. That was a last-ditch effort to go back with his former manager at Manchester United and Mourinho. And that was a disaster of a system. And the goals, hey, Matt, it's not bad to get 13 league goals when the primary penalty taker is Paulo Dybala. So, and again, they don't create. They only started playing well after Mourinho left. And even then, Tammy Abraham's there. There's been whispers of Tammy in Milan, by the way. For me, I just fiscally don't see Lukaku taking enough of a pay cut where Milan are the top buyers at that price. Like Milan, would you say, in another return question, would Milan offer the highest wages out of any team that would want Lukaku? I bet you Napoli would offer more. Seriously, because if they just hire Conte and Conte wants this guy and ADL doesn't offer the wages, I'd be surprised, to be honest with you. I think ADL does pay up sometimes. I have to give him credit for that. Milan,
yeah, I mean, I think the options are they're wearing thin at this point. I mean, he was quoted a couple weeks ago mentioning the Saudi league and saying it's legitimate and there's going to be a lot of players that go there and that people should take note of that. And but there doesn't seem like there's any steam there for a move, and it doesn't seem as though at this point of his career he wants to take that approach and go to the Saudi Pro League. So you look and are like thinking, where are other options? What other options does he have? He seems like he's a player that wants to stay in Italy. If you believe the Napoli link to Conte, playing under Conte, where he had his best years at Inter, went back to play for Roma. He was even trying to go and play for Juventus, right? There was that whole back and forth there. So that's like even another side of it, right? Where is ownership going to run the route of this is a player that's kind of a mercenary who isn't afraid to go and play for rivals all across Serie A. He'll go to anywhere who wants to play him.
Who does he have that in common with, by the way?
Ibrahimovic.
That's a part of the management.
Ibrahimovic.
Which
same
I
agent.
have a question for you.
Same agent, well, Raiola.
No, right? I think he left Rock Nation after.
No, but I'm saying, but I'm pretty sure it used to be.
Right? Yeah, they used to be Raiola clients. Yeah. And so, Mino. So the quick story, just a quick backstory for people. When Ibrahimovic and Lukaku were butting heads that first time when Inter had Lukaku, they were butting heads and there was the whole voodoo comment and everything that cut deeper, and Mino had to come out and say it, and Paul Pogba even made a comment because they thought there were some racial issues there, and when it wasn't, it was just the whole thing back in Manchester United with Lukaku's mother. It's a whole thing. You guys can read up on it if you want to, but that strain on that possible relationship with Zlatan, who they used to be former teammates at Manchester United. How does he get over that hump? And again,
Martino, though.
I think you're right. I don't think he gives a shit.
Martino, and just to add on to that too. I mean, on a smaller scale, there was another player that joined Milan to play with a player that he had a rift with in the past, Simon Kjaer. Yeah. Simon Kjaer and Ibrahimovic had their beef, right? And I know it's not the same money, and Simon Kjaer in a different part of his career, just trying to go back to Italy and play. But they threw that aside and look at the working relationship those two had. On the field, Simon Kjaer, well respected at Milan. Couple years that were really strong. So just to kind of put a bow on this whole Lukaku talk, I mean, I don't think it's going away. I just think that it's still an idea for Milan in the event that they can't get the Xerxes deal done or some of their primary alternatives over the line. Because I think it's really crucial that Milan start to get the guys in that they need. They can't make their search for a striker go into, mid to late July, because before you know it, the season's going to ramp up and you're going to be like, who's your guy that's delivering for you up front? So Milan have to make a decision soon. If they haven't already, we won't know if it's obviously not made public about who they want in this position. But the longer this rumor and these links and these talks go on with Lukaku, it almost feels as though there seems to be a little bit more distance between Milan and Xerxes and his entourage getting a deal done there. Because the longer that drags out, I think Milan would be the type of club and ownership and management to say, you know what, we've been going at this for a month and a half, 2 months. This is not getting done.
They're not.
We're going somewhere else.
So
that's how I feel it. So the longer that goes on, I still think that Lukaku talk can persist because, again, for the reasons I just mentioned earlier, the Chelsea connection, their willingness to offload him and
Yeah.
shed
There's
those
a lot more
wages.
willingness.
So I think it's a possibility. Whether the fan base is on board with it and whether I think that
They're
he
not
is the
going to
guy for
be.
the job is a whole nother conversation in and of itself.
Yeah, I don't think the fan base would be willing to, but that's why you guys are supposed to be commenting on the video. I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll get a bunch of rational thoughts here.
Yeah.
Nah, most of you guys are great. The thing is, the willingness on your part that you mentioned is that Lukaku wants to leave Chelsea. He wants to stop doing this every summer. He wants to find a new team. Chelsea want to get rid of him. I'm sure his agents just want to get this over with because he's kind of been passed around at this point. It's sort of been difficult, right? Because we know what happened last year. He was negotiating with Juventus. Juventus were asking for more money regarding Dusan Vlahovic. That deal didn't end up getting done. Lukaku still ended up leaving. Lukaku, again, there was rumors that he offered himself to Milan. Again, same management prior to Zlatan Ibrahimovic arriving because he arrived in December because everything happened over the summer. I'll say this as a final thought. If they were to do both strikers, that would also make me inclined to believe that they wouldn't stop spending in other areas. The odds of this happening, 15%, 20%. I don't see that. If they pull that off, then I think a conversation needs to be had about what they're capable of doing. Ultimately, I think you're right with these commission fees too with Xerxes. A lot of people seem to believe that Kia is going to come down from his number because all these other clubs are not willing to do it. I think there's only been one club out there that's even remotely interested, and that's United. Even then, Xerxes keeps wanting and pushing Milan. That's in every single report. Unfortunately, we're going to have to see what happens. 15 million, I don't know. But Lukaku, here's my final thought on him, fit-wise, culture-wise with Milan, is that if you have someone that feels like they've been mistreated or disrespected in many ways, right? A little similar to what Zlatan was like at Milan when he arrived, in that situation at Barcelona. Obviously, completely different. Lukaku's had more of a physical fall off. Zlatan's was more tactical and more of a cultural fit with Pep. Man, if you get a guy who's motivated and wants to win and wants to prove something, and you have someone like Zlatan and management pushing that every day, I think there is some upside there. I'm not saying I want this done, but I'm not going to write it off if it does happen. I think there's some potential. And moving on to that, players to sell. This has kind of been like a big topic that Matt and I have wanted to do. We're trying to get Ali on to kind of discuss more of the summer budget in its entirety. But players to sell for Milan, and Sempre Milan had mentioned this not long ago about Sorry, it must have been one of their graphics posted recently, and you sent it to me. So some of the players, and this is via Tutto Sport. So Tutto Sport, not a great source, but all these names make sense. They've been linked to lead for quite some time. Pellegrino, Ballatore, Origi, Romero, Salamakers, Maldini, Nasti. Marco Nasti was a player that used to be in the youth academy. He's been sort of in Serie B and been relatively decent and respectable. There's been some teams linked with him from Nicola Schira, Chaka Traore, Lorenzo Colombo, and possibilities that could end up going, depending on what Paulo Fonseca thinks, is Yacine Adli, Tommaso Pobega, and Alessandro Florenzi. All these names, they're not going to give you that much money. Most of them going to be plus Valenza. The toughest to get rid of is obviously Divock Origi, considering his wages. We've talked to people like Tom Bogert, for example, and others, where Origi's not really moving on the side of he's willing to take a pay cut. Part of why he's not going to MLS. You kind of hope Saudi does something here. That was only 2 years done. He's entering year 3 of that deal with Milan, where Maldini, they offered him quite a hefty amount of money with the growth decree. Out of all these names listed here, I'm not sure I want to keep a single one outside maybe Yacine Adli. Pobega, Florenzi, Colombo, Traore, Nasti, maybe Traore on loan. Maybe see if he does a little bit more. He didn't get much time with Palermo. Maldini, Salamakers, Romero, Origi, Ballatore, Pellegrino. There's the door. Pellegrino was brutal. Almost every single time he touched the pitch for
Yeah.
Salernitana. Obviously, his debut with Milan ends up getting hurt, also playing terrible. Raspadori dominated him. For me, I think this is just, you know, add whatever money you can in whatever way you can, because a lot of these names on this list, Matt, did not contribute to the team last year, and they
No.
probably won't contribute in the future. Does it hurt to lose 2 to 3 of these guys based off of, what you hope they could project as a player? Like, Colombo, I think everybody kind of wanted him to work out. Same thing goes for Maldini. Unfortunately, that's not really the path, and their levels seem to be elsewhere. Monza, Torino, etc. For me, I'm okay with moving on from every single person on this list. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of a couple, which players I would like to see us move on from, and which players I think the club will move on from, are two different conversations to have. I think, you mentioned Yassine Adli. That's absolutely valid. I feel like Yassine Adli, though, again, just feel at this point in
Mm-hmm.
time, I feel like he would be a pretty good player that would be somewhat useful under Fonseca, like
Okay.
technical. In the right system, I think Fonseca could do some decent things with Adli and his progression.
Yeah.
Again, just kind of like my basic understanding and knowledge of how Fonseca likes to set up his team and formation wise, because he did really well for the most part last year, and that was with him being in and out of the team. So I would agree with
And
Adli
out
being
of
one of the
position as
players.
well.
I'd like to see Adli get like that third year that like we've kind of been pinpointing for like some of the other star players we've had on this team. I don't think Adli's at that level, but year 3 has been a really good year for a lot of our top players. So I think Adli will be one. Pobega, I think we need to move on from him for sure. I think that you need to start to raise the bar from what your worst player is. And I say worst player not to be insulting, but more so that the best teams that compete regularly and win stuff, you look at it's not necessarily the strength of their starting 11 or their first names off the bench. It's okay, how good is their worst player? And I think that if you look at Milan's midfield, and if you're able to upgrade in that department from Pobega to someone who's a little bit more adequate, a little bit more of a contributor, then I'm totally on board with that. Plus, he comes with some plus for Lens, as you mentioned. I think that there's still some interest that would be out there in Serie A. You might get Torino back in for him, or some of these other teams who he played pretty well with, and he also was good at Spezia. So maybe Pobega's a fit for Bologna with Italiano. Maybe that's a fit, right? As like another option off their bench, because they're going to get picked apart. No insider information there, guys, just kind of off the top. But Chaka Traore is a player that, he did some good things for us in very limited time last year. I think he had his first goal in the Copa. And then
against Cagliari.
And then he had his goal right after that, and he seemed to be taken under the wing of Rafa. So I think maybe a loan move would benefit him. Maybe somewhat similar to what happened with Luca Romero, who is another name. I think Milan have to kind of decide on that, because
and rumored back to La Liga is what.
Yeah, he wants to stay in La Liga, so I think that's going to get sorted. He's not coming back.
They got him on a free, by the way, so that would be another plus for Lenzo, whatever.
Yeah, and he played pretty well in Spain from what I know.
Yeah, he was okay. Yeah,
when he had a couple moments. Right. So I think you're not going to see me hollering, shouting, and complaining about if any of these names go. I think Milan, to your point, need to raise money where they can. I do find it interesting, though, that the one name that I think at least I was expecting to see on that list or hear from that list, Salamakers. Like Salamakers.
He was. I mentioned him.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
So does he stay? I don't know if he does. I think that people case that Fonseca might say, hey, he played pretty well under Bologna. I want to have that opportunity to work with him. Maybe I can make him into a hybrid winger, a wing back, fullback, and he could be a rotational option. Or does Alexis Salamakers and his agent say, I want a permanent solution. I don't think you're going to give me the starting minutes I want. And he goes somewhere else. Or maybe he stays at Bologna and they work out a deal to lower the fee. Who knows? But yeah,
Italiano just didn't want him in general.
Milan need to just cut their losses with most of these guys. I think the one that might feel a certain type of way, just because again he was part of the Scudetto winning season, and he had some pretty good moments for Milan. It's just injuries have really hit him hard. Is Florenzi? You know, Florenzi is one of those like type of players that you'd like to keep in your squad, if nothing else, as that veteran leadership, that presence that we're still going to be lacking, you know, and that we have been losing over the past couple of years with Zlatan, with Giroud, with Simon Kjaer. So I still think that there might be some room for him to stay for another year. But again, I think there's a lot of the names on that list that, frankly, Milan do need to upgrade on and also find a way to get a return on. Maldini, I'll say this as my final point, and many of these other players on this list, Milan can't get in a position where they're just letting players that have some upside walk for free. I know there was conflicting reports about Maldini. He might go to Monza for free. Whatever the case may be, I think there's some quality there. It's not at Milan. I don't think that's his level. But Milan can't be letting these guys just kind of walk away willy-nilly. They got to get something for them.
Correct.
If I'm seeing,
it's why his dad lost the
Martino,
job.
if I'm seeing Moise Kean potentially go for 12 million to Fiorentina, I know he's young and he has Moise Kean come from Juventus. He played at PSG. He had no goals last year. He hasn't been a player that really has delivered, and people can say it's down to Max Allegri.
Yeah.
But 12 million for a player that's like their fourth striker for a team like Fiorentina, who, you know, are back-to-back Conference League finalists, like 12 million is a lot for a player. I wasn't expecting Moise Kean to go for 12 million, if that is the number. So Milan need to get something from these guys.
I think Ballatore will be difficult to offload. Origi, obviously. Pellegrino.
Sure. Milan might have to eat some of that salary in any deal.
I think they have to eat on a couple of these. Salamakers, I think he'll find a home. I think he's capable. I don't think he fits in a Fonseca system. He's
what if he goes to Atalanta?
Huh?
What if he was to go to a team like Atalanta?
I don't care. Just take whatever money. Anything you get like 10+ million for this guy is a boost. Like, honestly, it just is. Yeah. And I respect Salamakers for what he is as a player, but he literally doesn't fit this team. He just doesn't. Like, right? Like, if they go to a 4-3-3, doesn't fit it. Is a 4-2-3-1, doesn't fit that either. Right? There's no wing back system at Milan. That's not a thing. It's not going to be a thing. If they wanted 3 at the back, then they would have completely changed everything up and also not have gone for Paulo Fonseca. Just doesn't fit their style. Should be able to recoup some money and get something from that. Maldini, nasty. This doesn't even include Brescianini, who is also 50% resale. So whenever he gets sold, Milan will be
making with him. I've seen some pretty decent clubs like
some pretty decent clubs with him. So that's another youth product there. Again, this just has to add up, right? I will see what happens with Pobega, but just off the top of my head, if the Maldini stuff is true, that his contract goes to 2025, he's not going to be leaving free to go to Monza. That's been conflicting. I talked with some of the guys at Sempre Milan. They said the contract goes to 2025. Di Marzio said it expires now and he's going on a free. I felt like that would have been known already.
Right.
That his contract was done.
Like, how would you? That's public information. Someone would have been like,
it's been very odd with his contract. But either way, Maldini's future is no longer. I think Colombo and Pobega, like these figures add up. Right there with those 4 players, in my opinion, you could get close to 20 million. Right?
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah. So go ahead. What was the question?
From that lot, let's assume not all of them, because I think that Milan might have to fill out their squad with some of these guys and whatever. Some guys are going to go on.
Yeah, I think they'll promote like Zerolis of the world.
How much could you realistically expect to generate from whatever from that batch? Call it 5 players, 6 players, and you pick the 5 or 6 players and say, based on Pobega, this guy, I can expect Milan to bring back 30 million.
I think Salamakers, Colombo, and Pobega alone can get you 20 million. I think Salamakers around 10 million is fair. Pobega, you're talking 6 to 8 million. I think Colombo could be also in that territory as well because he's a striker with some upside. Very young, Italian. I think he just needs a home. Right there, like what you're talking about is at worst like 5 million for these guys. Pure plus Valenza. Okay.
Salamakers, I think. CDK.
Yeah, yes, correct. And then also money off of the books adds to your budget. So Giroud, Caldara, that stuff matters. And then we'll see with Romero. I'm not sure what the figures would be. Maldini was rumored around 5 million euro. You add that in there. Nasty could get you a couple of million at most. I think you still just take that. You just add whatever you can. Ballatore, not going to get much. Origi, be stunning if they got anything.
Those are salary dumps.
Yeah. And again, like Florenzi, another salary dump. Traore, I think, would be an option where they could get some cash back and it would be nice for them. Again, this isn't a future here for him, in my opinion. As much as I like him, I would love to see in offense. I think we all want to see an offensive player from Milan's youth system come in and thrive. We've seen some okay defenders. We've seen a great goalkeeper. We've seen a couple of decent and respectable midfielders. I guess you could say respectable in the sense of they're professionals in Serie A. But I want to see a guy explode onto the scene. That's a Milan youth. Could be Camarda, could be Kevin Zeroli. I just think if you get at least 15 million from all these players, and I think you could get more than 20, it's a plus. How many contributed
plus
here?
Our budget? Yeah.
How many contributed here, guys? Like next to nobody. Like we're talking about Pellegrino, nothing. Ballatore, nothing. Origi, loan, nothing. Romero, loan, nothing. Salamakers did nothing. He was at Bologna. Maldini, he was at Empoli and then he went to Monza. Nasti has never played for Milan. Traore actually contributed somewhat. Colombo didn't play at Milan, had to go to Monza this entire year. Yassine Adli, a contributor, yes. Pobega did absolutely nothing this season. He was injured for a large portion of it. And then Florenzi actually did something, but he's respectable. He's older. His wages, blah, blah, blah. Okay, these aren't hard decisions, guys. Yeah. If you want to keep some of them, I would be inclined to say that you're being a little emotional about it.
This is where
that you want to see these guys thrive.
This is where, yeah, I mean, this is where you kind of you hope that Furlani and those guys making the decisions with the market and on the selling side can wheel and deal and like, hey guys, we were able to swindle this team into taking Pobega for $8 million with an obligation.
They've done a good job at selling. They've done a respectable job at selling. I don't hate it.
There's an element to it. People will focus, and this is kind of my last thing. We can move on to whatever our final topic is. But I think that, there's something to be said about the clubs that, do a really good job of selling and working with diminished assets and assets that really don't have any place at the club, and how you're able to kind of use that as a source of, of profit and a way to put back into your budget. I mean, look what Atalanta, look what some of these other clubs do. Again, I know it's a different conversation. They sell players that are young, do really well, and they flip them. But if you're in a position where you say, hey, like Furlani is able to generate X from this, and that is something that can be put back into, let's say, a late push for another player. I mean, that was a conversation that people were talking about last year, where it's always with Milan, right? The past handful of years. If they can sell this player, there might be a little bit extra in the budget for them to get like another final piece in the midfield. And everyone was saying, how about Nandez? Or how about Dominguez? I know Nandez was linked to Juventus a couple years ago. But how about Dominguez? Like, he would fit. We need someone in that role. And we just maybe didn't have enough in the budget, or we just couldn't make it work.
It even happened with Julian Alvarez. You remember that? In January, they're like, we don't have the funds for it.
Right. Sorry. So, like, this is what I'm saying. Like, if Milan can get a little savvy on the sale side with some of these players, then I think you have that opportunity for maybe a little bit of a luxury buy, or like you get that additional piece. Like, hey, maybe we can get that extra bump and pay for the right back we actually want, or that extra midfielder that we really do need. And we can maybe stretch the bid for a player that, frankly, Milan is a team that's really gets stuck in their ways with how they value players. But if you're able to generate a little bit more here and there, maybe you're saying, we like this guy enough, we're going to go a little bit more for Fofana.
Yeah. There, in one of the points too, that Messias Krunic, there was even this, right? Taremi last year in the end of August.
Yeah.
There was reported like things that they didn't want to pay up the commissions, and Porto was asking a lot of money at that point. And then obviously that number got worked down. Porto wasn't willing to sell. So the point was there was some willingness on Milan's end to actually push forward towards a Taremi. And it was rumored again in January that they had some money to play with. They weren't interested in certain players. Remember the push for Buongiorno. There seems to be some money there. And I know a lot of it is talk. I get that. Don't get me wrong. However, if there was money there, and they did sell those players, as we mentioned in January, and the real only investment was Terracciano, who we'll see what happens there. I think you're kind of right that there might be something for them to actually make a move for somebody. It's just hard to say because we haven't had proof that they're going to do it, right? Like, and again, too, we were talking to our good friend Pep Barisha about this. There hasn't actually been many moves in the market in general,
in
right? There's
general.
some free agency dealings. Mbappe went, Taremi is going, Zielinski, um, and obviously some obligation deals. You see Olise with Bayern. But overall, we actually haven't seen money be moved around. We haven't seen teams make big purchases yet.
Yeah.
Like Victor Gyökeres, what's happening there? Sporting have an incredible striker, supposedly. No one's splashing cash for that. Ivan Toney, all these different types of players,
Yeah.
guys are still staying. No one of significance has made big moves yet. There's been a couple of them, but there hasn't
I
been
also
that much
think
movement.
too that there's certain dominoes that might need to fall in the market for you mean Martin, I don't even need to explain that. You know this, right? Like in certain sports where it's like this player signs for this much money or he moves for
Yeah.
this much, so that sets the bar for the next guy who is in line for a contract or a move to
Yeah.
get a little bit more than that, right? We see it all the time in football, NBA,
Yeah.
baseball, whatever. So I think that there is like the Mbappe thing aside, like that was kind of a we knew that was coming. It was just like
Yeah.
season's over, he's going to Real Madrid. I
Yeah.
think there's a couple dominoes that need to fall because I think Sesko's off the market now. They
Mm.
they they extended his deal. It's Xerxes, okay, but like, what's happening with Osimhen? That track is pretty quiet,
It's only been Gurasi, like I mentioned now.
right?
So like these are
And
all kind of like mid-level-ish moves, nothing
there's
like
not a lot of
breaking
guys
bank.
that have been moving that are market setting, market transcending moves so far
Yeah, I
in
agree with you.
those primary areas. I know Matson, I know certain guys, but you get the point, right? So I think
Yeah.
that we still need to see what the future holds for some of these other pieces, and things will fall into play. I'm not trying to get too impatient. Like I would like to see
Of course.
Milan be a little bit aggressive and get deals done quickly. I know that's kind of what everyone's hoping for because they have to be calculated, yes, but they also need to get these deals done quickly because you're talking a new coach, you're talking a new system, you're talking new ideas and ideals and vision for what type of football they want to play. So you can't linger and let this sort of fester to the point where, hey guys, it's mid-July, we don't have any guys in here. Like now you have to start wheeling and dealing, and that's
Yeah.
where you overpay.
And they did
So
such a great job last year.
yeah,
I don't care what some people say. The team was 30 points off of the top. Did I like selling Tonali? No. But again, if we objectively look at last summer's transfer market, they had a lot of hits.
yeah.
They had a lot of hits. The team didn't play well for multiple reasons. Not, in my opinion, none of which was because of who they bought in the transfer market. The guys they bought in the transfer market did their job for the most part. Like
Pulisic was
they
one
didn't,
of the top 3 signings in Serie A last year, and
one of the top 10 in the world,
one of the top
honestly.
10 in Europe for sure.
Easily, I think. I agree with you. That like Chukwueze, Reinders was a hit. Loftus Cheek, say what you want about him, certainly flawed as a player sometimes. He produced. He produced. He was a goal scoring contributor to this team. And again, you know, we're gonna have to see what the level of difference is with a new manager. Sorry. And the defense was shambolic. So they have to do that. So we'll get to some of your questions right now. We appreciate you guys sending them on in. So we'll kind of start off with Michael Gambino, and this kind of goes into what we were just talking about. Why do you think Milan are not in for Calafiori or Buongiorno? If Napoli/Juve are able to afford, Milan should be able to be in the race. Napoli are able to afford because they sell a bunch of players all the time, and now they have Antonio Conte, so they need to do what Conte asks. Otherwise,
Yeah, totally fair.
that's immediately going to blow up in their face. They're more desperate for a defender after what everybody saw in their defense last year. Buongiorno, someone that I do want and would like at Milan. Calafiori, how many times do you say this line? The price of brick just went up. Like, come on.
Yeah.
After that assist, guys,
Yesterday's price is not today's price, guys.
it's over. It's over for Calafiori. Like this was never on the table. The closest Milan got was last year when they sent in a cheeky loan for to Basel for Calafiori to be Teo Hernandez's backup. Now he's a better center back than Milan have.
Yeah.
Like that's
And also too,
things saw the
Basel
last
have
season, right?
a 40 or 50% resale on any fee over 6 million if So just to get that to perspective.
This is Basel you're talking about, correct? Or
Yeah, Basel. So any fee, and I'm seeing 40, I'm seeing 50. I think the number pre-Euro was 40, and now I'm seeing 40, 50, and now all of a sudden
I think it's going to
Tottenham
be
and this
around
club
50.
and that club, and there's multiple Premier League teams. So now that is going to drive up the price, and also the two guys,
Wages,
the price of Aura, it's high. It's
bro.
it's
Wages alone. What he's going to be like again.
this guy. This is, and it's international summer, right? International competition summer. How many times does this happen? Player does well, get that brighter stage,
I mean,
because
he
not a
was
lot of
so
people
good
were
all
watching
year.
Bologna. Some people were, mostly Serie A fans, but there's not a lot of people watching Bologna on a regular to know, oh, Calafiore is pretty solid. He can dribble, he can pull the ball out of the back and push forward like he did on the goal that Zaccagni scored. So that track is gone. I think Buongiorno, I think, is gone too. I think he's going to Napoli.
Yeah.
It's just the
good
market's
signing.
tough for center backs. It really is tough. We got to hope that Kalulu has a bounce back, because I just don't see a
He's so much
idea.
better than.
I don't
Dude,
see
he's so
I
talented.
don't see a reality where we sell him off an injury. I think that's
I
selling
kind
him
of agree.
kinda
Yeah, we
low.
talked about this months ago. Like,
Yeah.
it's too low of a stock to sell a player on.
Yeah.
The defenders, I think these guys would fit, and it's so annoying because I've said this too with the Vlahovic and Chiesa deals with Juventus. Milan are still they're just missing. They feel like they're so close to this window where they're able to just shut up and spend the money for a guy where the price is high within Serie A, where they're like, we don't actually have to think about this. Buongiorno, they have to think about it. They're interested in January. The price is around 40 to 45 million. I agree. I understand where management is coming from. I truly do. I truly do. Okay. 40 million is a lot for a guy off of 1 year. Same goes for Calafiore.
I will say this though, Martino, and this is kind of like my own final part on the whole center back question that Michael asked. I think that as a fan, again, we're the fans. It's not our money, so we're saying and speaking and talking and giving our thoughts with more like emotion, because we want to get good players in here. I think that if you told this to any fan right now, if you said, "Hey guys, we're going to go out there and we're going to spend 40 million on Buongiorno," and it flops, the deal doesn't work out, and he's not the player we thought we were getting.
Sure.
I don't think anyone's going to be irate, because I think at the time of the deal, he was a hot commodity. He was probably worth it in the market, when you consider the market for a good center back. But I think that Milan want to see that ambition. And I think that kind of goes back to the whole Xerxes push. If you're able to get a player that cost off a really good year from Bologna, highly touted, and you're the one that's able to say, we're going to ante up, we're triggering the clause, we're getting this guy in. They do need to make that sort of market acquisition that'll silence a lot of people that are saying they don't have ambition. They're not spending up. Why aren't they getting top high level players? I think that's what Milan fans are really hoping for. I don't think it's going to come in the center back market, guys, but that I think is kind of the feeling and idea that Milan fans want from some of the players they bring in this summer.
And that's exactly the point I made months ago when I was like, and I said this even a couple of weeks ago too, about paying up. When Milan invested in Leonardo Bonucci, regardless of the situation back in 2017, that right there is emotionally the most significant transfer of the past 10 years for the club, besides Zlatan returning. Talking about pure emotion to get fans interested. Regardless of how other things played out, keeping Montella, these wages and commissions, the financial fair play situation Milan were in 2017. When they made the deal for Bonucci, who at the time was a top 5 center back in the world, that signaled to fans, we're here. This means something again. We're here to fight for players. We're here to sign the best talents available. And I like how Milan have done business over the past few years. But there has been, you and I agree on this, right? Because Leao is more upside. He was sort of an unknown. A lot of these guys are. There hasn't been that one signing, right? Again, Pulisic buying low on that stock. Loftus-Cheek buying low on that stock. Tomori, sort of an outcast. These are good deals. But as you mentioned, sometimes there is a deal, like not to say that it's going to happen this summer for Milan. I don't think so. It would have been Sesko, for example, right? I think
Right.
Xerxes can kind of get that pull. I
Like
think
a
it would
like
get
a tone like a tone
a tone
setting
like
tone
Milan.
setting acquisition that the rest of the market, the rest of Europe goes, whoa, like
Yeah,
they went out there and
exactly,
got Sesko.
exactly. People turn their heads
Yeah.
when Milan signed Bonucci.
Yeah.
Not many people have turned their heads for what Milan is doing in the market, and that's sort of emotional. It's sort of fiscal. It all matters. It all intertwines. I think what a lot of people need to see from Redbird, and this is kind of like the disconnect
They're
and
not
trust.
emotional like that. They're yeah.
There's a lot of disconnect because you sack Maldini, you sell Tonali, you finish in more losses against Inter. You fall short of all these goals. Like we discussed it last episode, it was a failure. You need to do something. Okay, but Jerry Cardinal, and there's just so many things to this because you could do a pod on like this kind of stuff alone. When Jerry Cardinal was on a podcast with Alex Rodriguez, okay, and him and A-Rod were sitting there talking about how they changed the New York Yankees, and they still only had one championship since 2001. Okay, for them that's a disaster. The point is they weren't winning for years. They were sort of these failure teams that were super talented. They got embarrassed by their rivals in the Red Sox, not only in that 3-0 series in 2004. There was 2007 when they won the World Series again. They had won it twice since the Yankees last won it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Yankees were coming off a missed year of the postseason where failures were high. Okay. And Jerry Cardinal and A-Rod sat down supposedly and said, let's spend some money and make some game-changing plays where they get CC Sabathia, they get Mark Teixeira, they get AJ Burnett. Completely change the Yankees. Completely change the perception of them. They go and win the World Series immediately.
Also, too, Martino, that's a really good point there because you also look at the fact that was, I think, the inaugural season of their new stadium.
Yeah, it was the first year. Yeah.
So Milan are trying to head in that direction where they're trying to
Who
get
knows
their own
with that
stadium.
thing? Who knows with that thing?
Right.
But
So that's
the point is right. Like
yeah.
you wanna like hear about all this kind of cute stuff of like we're building something, we're supposed to be sustainable on our own. Like I'm fine with all that. That all makes sense. It's all true because we saw what happened when Milan were ran terribly fiscally. It ruined them. It ruined them. This is why they're still in this spot because of what happened. Like that has to be said. And again, just my point is like there's statement type of moves, and Milan needs that more than any club in Serie A. I'm sorry. Like it's just true. It's just a fact. Inter, they constantly win trophies. Napoli, as disastrous as that one season one was, they won their first Scudetto in 30 plus years.
I mean, and Inter have even made for a team that has been dealing and trying to juggle their own financial issues and how much they can spend.
They find a way.
What did they do last year? They went out there and spent what, 40 million almost on a Pavard? Like,
yeah, it was a big transfer for them.
Right. So I absolutely agree with you. I think that the way we think, I think is what the fan base is hoping for and thinking. But I think the way that we've approached the market last year and the way that we seem to go about our business
this year,
unfortunately, I don't see the ownership and management aligning with the way we want as far as our vision. I'm not saying we're not going to get good players, but I don't think they're the type of management ownership that's going to go and say, oh, you guys want a sexy move? Let's go and spend 50 million for this. They're not going to do that. They're not going to deviate from their plan.
Unfortunately, right? Like, because I could signal and think of multiple clubs doing multiple moves over the years where you're like, wow, Juve, Chiesa, Vlahovic. Regardless of where Juve was, you were like, wow, that's spending power. They're going for it. These are the top dogs that are wanted by many teams.
Yeah.
Napoli, Victor Osimhen. Napoli just spent 70 million on a striker. My goodness. Inter, Lukaku, right? Hakimi. These players where they spent, even Barella cost a good amount of money. Yeah. I am also of the belief, and again, before we move on for a couple more questions and we end here, the second that Milan get like a really nice and talented signing, I think fans will calm down a little bit more, just a little bit more. I think it'll help. Like if a Max Weifer, for example, were to come in from Feyenoord, that a lot of people like, defensive midfielder costing around 20 to 25 million. I think that gets some of the fan base excited. But ultimately, I think if they finally get Xerxes over the line, I think a lot more fans will be at ease, because I think at that point they know, okay, if they're willing to dish out this much money on one player, which would be 40 million euro, they would be able to start moving in the right back area. And again, the links are not what fans want to hear, because they hear more of the same, right? Where it's like Emerson Royale for 20 million. What? Why? They hate that. They don't think it makes sense. And I agree with them. And then you hear Xerxes. Oh, wow, that's great. Milan are willing to pay 40 million. Okay. Is the signing done? Because he's agreed to us. And then they hear and read, well, they don't want to pay the agent commissions.
That's what I think too. That's why I truly do think that the Xerxes deal, for that reason that you mentioned, like we need to see a signing get done. In many ways, it's almost like the Catalari situation. Like we spent so much time on CDK, that deal just had to get done. There was no reality where Milan just didn't get that deal done after spending countless weeks in the summer and making it a back and forth. I think there are some similarities there with Xerxes, because I think from optics, Milan also can't afford to lose out on Xerxes given the amount of time they invested in that negotiation.
Yeah, and
you can't be all in, paperwork ready, clause ready, like wages ready, players ready to go, and be like, nah, we're good.
Yeah.
I just don't think you can sell that and you can show that to the fans at this point, personally.
I agree with you. I just think it just comes short of expectations, and what fans ultimately want is a team that could compete with Inter and beat Inter.
Yeah.
And as of today, June 26, 2024, Milan don't have that squad. They didn't even move closer in a player. Okay. Michael also has another question. What's the likelihood Milan turn back to Jonathan David amid the Xerxes deal stall? I don't know. I think we kind of just touched upon it of what we were just saying even earlier with Lukaku. Ultimately, it really comes down to if we know for sure Xerxes is not leaving anywhere.
Chelsea also or Ornstein said Chelsea were hot on
Jonathan David. I think multiple teams in on Jonathan David. I don't think David comes here, but
so spot on to what Josh said a couple weeks ago when he said that we were saying Premier League doesn't seem to be there. Apparently not, because
Josh does a great job, guys. Be sure to go and check out that podcast we did with him. Christian Espinoza, who should be the next American Milan signing? Us? There's no. What'd you say?
Gio Reyna. I know you said you liked him. You're like, oh, what about him? I'm like, maybe.
I love Gio Reyna, but he's not.
Anthony Robinson?
Nah, it doesn't make sense. I think he's starter level quality. I don't think he would sit on the bench for Milan. I think he's actually a very talented player.
Yeah, no.
And I'm not sure how he would be able to play considering his heart condition. That's why he wasn't able to play in Serie A. Different leagues have different rules. That's why Daley Blind had to go to Holland because he wasn't allowed to play in Serie A. That's why Christian Eriksen wasn't allowed to play in Serie A again because of his heart condition.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that. I think we were after Anthony Robinson the same window.
We were. And then Anthony came in for his medical, and Milan's medical team checked him out, and they said, you have a heart problem. And
crazy.
They couldn't sign him because of that problem. And that's why Anthony Robinson did not end up signing.
He's been great, man. I've seen a lot of people from this past season putting him in their team of the year for that position.
Oh, yeah, he was phenomenal at Fulham.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Fulham. But he was very good job. Oh, my God. Almost every single time I watched him. But no one else really, Christian, to be honest with you. I don't think anyone is of that quality.
Balogun was one last year, but that's
Balogun going for 40 million, the price that Xerxes is going for. No thanks.
He went to Monaco too.
Giancarlo Mango Eater says no. So shout out Giancarlo.
Yeah.
And our good friend Fabio from Long Island with a non-Milan question. It's really just about Italy's chances on retaining their Euro title. Their path just got a little bit easier yesterday.
Hey,
Switzerland,
Poland. That's Lewandowski.
Yeah, dude. I love Louis. I think he deserved a Ballon d'Or. He's one of the best strikers I've ever seen.
He just helped us out, though.
Get the fuck out of here with that penalty take. Hey. That is and he didn't break the rules. He's doing what he's
the loophole, right?
Bullshit. unbelievable at the
Wasn't that
expense of
changed a couple years ago though? Like the stop, like
dude, it's all bullshit.
it's all
Like
yeah.
it's and by the way, Mike Magnan finally makes a penalty save and it
I
doesn't count
know.
for him.
I
This
know.
poor guy. This poor guy. Magnan has looked terrific
Yeah.
in Euro. I will say this.
And our former goalkeeper too.
Gijo's been phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
I listen. I'm over the Gijo style. I've been over it for years.
Yeah.
I still, I don't think he'll come back, but I think he'll return to Italy one day. And you never know. Never say never. I just don't think that happens because his feet are still terrible. I will say this: Switzerland is super tough. You think a little differently than I do, I guess, on this. I'm not very confident heading in against them. Calafiore is not going to be starting, obviously. You see Buongiorno get in there. I have a feeling that Mancini will get in. It's tough.
You know what it is though about this
This
Italy
guy
team?
isn't selecting the right lineup though. It's
I
just
know, I
stupid
know.
every time. It's like
It's a lot of it's the selection, but I think if you're the type of person that believes in like the intangible feelings and emotions and like those things, how they have
that was
impact.
a yeah. I get where you're getting at.
I think if you're looking at thinking to my if you're looking at it and saying like, well, Italy barely got by. Tough group. They didn't play great. Spalletti, a lot of things came under question with his choices, and yet here they are with a pretty favorable path to a final. These tournaments, Italy can get hot. They can play it to their strengths, and you might look around and say, "Hey, they're in a semifinal final." It's not beyond the realm of possibility. So, repeating's
No.
difficult.
I had us in the semifinal. I had us beating England again. So that
Repeating's
was
tough, but I think it was funny too. Danny Russo, shout out him, big Napoli guys, obviously friend of the
he's been
show,
on
friend
the
of
podcast. Yeah.
us. He said like in one of our chats, he was saying like, would you guys take like just an absolute shit show abysmal Euro in favor of like a dream World Cup run in 2026? I'm like, hell yeah, like I'd probably take that.
I mean, wait. So like to do what in the World Cup?
Like
Sorry.
so because we just won the Euro, right? We just won the
Yeah.
Euro. He was like, would you take like the inverse, right? Because so we had the good Euro run in
Yeah. Sure.
2016, 2018, terrible. 2020, we won, didn't make the next World Cup. But like, would you take like at this point, obviously we advanced, but would you have taken Italy just like not even getting out of the group and having a bad Euro in favor of like a great World Cup run where they make it and they make a serious push, because we haven't seen a serious push from Italy and
So you're
God knows how
saying a
long.
crappy run this Euro for
Like, would you take like a disappointing Euro in favor of
yeah,
a great Euro World
dude,
Cup run?
they've been by far the most disappointing country out of all the elite teams in the World Cup
Yeah.
for almost 20 years. Almost 20 years. We're talking about 0 knockout stage games for the 4-time champions.
2010 was abysmal. 2014 was abysmal.
Awful. Didn't make it.
2018, you didn't make it. 2022, you didn't make it.
And they expanded the field this time. They
That's
expanded
crazy.
the field
Yeah.
for teams to make it.
Yeah.
And to Fabio's question, Italy on paper, in my opinion, are capable of going toe to toe with most of the teams in this competition. I think Spain, Germany, Portugal are better. I think they're better teams, and France. I do think, however, any day of the week they can play against England. They can beat England. I think they could actually go forth and make a semifinal with the way it's lined up. I had us beating England. I had us beating Switzerland.
Also, how many teams, how many powers and dominant nations have like shown out here at this tournament?
Spain? I think just Spain and Germany.
Right? Look at France. France haven't looked great.
No, France.
I know on paper France are phenomenal.
France have scored one. I don't think France have scored an open play goal in group
Portugal.
play. Portugal's look fine. It's just,
but I'm saying like it's not like the world powers that Italy would be competing with for a Euro are like running the gauntlet. It's like, man, like everyone else is playing well, and Italy are just kind of limping on by here. So I think like there's a real window for Italy to get their act together and go on a run. I mean, it's one-off games, guys. This isn't 7-game series, best of 5, best of 3. Like one game can anything could happen. So
yeah. So again, we appreciate all of you guys. Please follow us on Apple and Spotify, That Milan Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at That Milan Pod. We appreciate all the support from every single person that shows up to every single podcast. We get over 1,000 views per video here on YouTube. It's just been great growth. It's been a lot of fun talking to the community. Please give us your thoughts. Give us your thoughts on who you think is going to win Euro 2024. You can go follow myself at Martino Puccio on all social media platforms. Matt, you can be found at Matt_Santangelo, at AC Milan Bros. We've had everything on the ticker for the longest time. Final thoughts before we finish right now.
Forza Azzurri. That's it. Forza Milan, always.
All right, guys. Thanks. Take care.